Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, my co-masterants, and good afternoon, Mr. Mark Benigno Olaguer. So, I am Rafael Giovanni, and this afternoon, I am tasked to report about the Filipino values and discipline and our considerations on discipline. So, this afternoon, the contents of my report are first, what is discipline? Second, effective discipline, Filipinos' values with regards to discipline, and based on scope of values, negative mentalities of Filipinos, Pinoy style considerations on discipline. So first, to start with this report, I would just like to share to you the views of the Filipinos on how disciplined are Filipinos. So there are a lot that I have screenshot, but I will just read a few. So first, how disciplined are Filipinos? So, from Armando Tavera from Las Piñas City, he says that, send a Pinoy abroad and you'll see a refined and disciplined person. It's very sad that we can't be the same in our own turf. And from Jose Favelio Jr. from Cagayan de Oro, when abroad, most Filipinos are disciplined a lot. But at home, we are as free as Maya, nonchalantly eating in the rice field, unmindful of the scarecrows. So there are also the view of the naturally disciplined Filipino. So from Luisito Valio from Pangasinan, he said that, I observed that Filipinos tend to be well disciplined in other countries where laws are implemented strictly. I believe that we are naturally disciplined. It's just that we make a mockery of rules if we think that those who are enforcing them are the ones breaking them. And also, another view with the point of lack of discipline is in our nature from Leonard Villa from Batac City. He said that Filipinos in general are lacking in discipline. We even flaunt our hard-headedness and commit crimes in other countries. It's in our culture. So such a negative view, right? We also have the view of Filipinos as survivors from Eric Copilan in Quezon City. He said that Filipinos are disciplined, at least our conservative culture says so, but some just resort their survival instinct due to daily hardship. And then this one, no discipline on the street from Manny Cordeta in Marikina City said, no offense meant, but sadly, much is left to be desired. A case in point which for sure other pedestrians like me have experienced more often than not. Inconsiderate motorists, instead of slowing down, would deliberately step on their gas even if person is crossing a street. This is so glaringly different based on my experience from US, where operators of private or public vehicles give much courtesy to the pedestrian by slowing down. Actually, there's a lot of comment here, just like we all have a lot to learn. Like most of us are undisciplined. I have a hard time disciplining myself. I counsel but I don't do what I say. There's also the youth are undisciplined. So from Jobert Mendoza in Metro Manila, he says that the discipline of Filipinos is deteriorating. Teenagers nowadays are exposed to all kinds of evil things, drinking, smoking, and drugs, and because of this, teenagers lose control. And this one, we tend to make rules. So from Dave Velasco, we are an easygoing people. Actually, there are a lot of comments and views and that even we ourselves hold on to on how disciplined are Filipinos. There's one also here, situational discipline. So, knowing or having read these comments from our co-Filipinos, we need to see what is discipline. So why are Filipinos not disciplined in how we see ourselves? So first, the definition of discipline. So discipline is an action or inaction that is regulated to be in accordance to with a particular system of governance. Second, it is commonly applied to regulating human and animal behavior to its society or environment it belongs. And then in the academic and professional worlds, a discipline is a specific branch of knowledge, learning, or practice. And then discipline also can be a set of expectations that are required by any governing entity, including ourselves, groups, classes, fields, industries, or societies. So those are the definition of discipline. Now, there are two kinds of discipline. First is the internal discipline, that is you yourself, restraint, and your ability to differentiate right from wrong. So you have the self-restraint, the self-control in yourself. You have self-discipline. So that is the internal discipline. And the second one is the external discipline, that it is according to the societal norms such as following the law, following what your parents have said, following what your teacher have said, following what the police officers have said. So those are the examples of external discipline. So now, what are the effective discipline? Knowing what is discipline and what are the kinds of discipline. Now, what is an effective discipline? So here we can see that effective discipline means teaching or learning, not punishing. Because once we hear discipline in our mind, we can immediately connect or associate discipline to spanking, to using of belts, using of chinelas to discipline the children. But the discipline itself does not have punishing as its purpose. Effective discipline is teaching and learning of the subordinates. And then second, it seeks to get wholehearted, enthusiastic response. So if your discipline has the response of rebellion, then it's not an effective discipline. Third, the subordinate understands that what and why is, and then sincerely interested and is willing to play the game in which he does not simply submit to a command. And then lastly, the primary purpose of effective discipline is to correct the subordinate shortcoming, if possible, rather than inflict punishment. Our last resort in discipline should be the punishment. So as much as possible as we can, we should avoid inflicting punishment. And now, let's proceed to the Filipino values. So with regards to discipline, what are the Filipino values? So it's just that people or nation behaves in ways which make sense to them. Thus, there is a rationality and pattern in the behavior of Filipinos. As one local saying goes, may katwiran ang katwirang Pilipino. But here, Filipino values is just superiors could improve and discipline and performance of their subordinates simply by making better use of existing resources. And what are these? These are the Filipino values. And then the basic values of Filipinos, at what we have learned in the previous discussion, is that Filipino as people are based on their religion, on their job, and on their family. So these three factors indicate what is of value and of no value to Filipinos. And now, let's have the definition of terms in terms of value. So we have the primary values, the secondary values, the self-esteem, and the empathy. The primary values is understood values that are chosen by a person, that he is happy with, and that are necessary for his authentic development. These values help a human being develop himself to the best of his capacity. So they help a person make choices based from alternatives. The secondary values is that it is an obligating values. It is somewhat like the external discipline that I have mentioned earlier. So every society has the certain values which its member must develop. For example, workers perform a job in accordance with the obligatory rules set by the management. And also we have self-esteem. Self-esteem is the belief or pride in oneself. So it is self-respect, self-image. So once disciplining, we should avoid touching the self-esteem of a person, because if you touch the self-esteem of a person, it may somewhat give a negative effect to your discipline, a negative effect to their function, a negative effect to their quality of work. So for us to avoid that, we need to know what is empathy. So empathy is the ability to understand the content of what another person is saying and the feelings of that person at that time. Definitely, discipline is not just saying what you want to say. So discipline takes a lot of consideration. So now let's go to the base and scope of values, since we are talking about the Filipino values in terms of discipline. So what are the base and scope of values? So for us to know this, we need to answer these two questions. What values does a worker seek? Or what values does this person seek? Then what techniques does he use to achieve these sought values? So if we know this, we will definitely know the base and scope of values that person hold. So it is important to identify the scope of value, for only in this way we can address ourselves to the underlying cause and basic needs rather than the surface symptoms. For example, a student employee who may work as a janitor in order to earn some money. So his base value here is the money. However, his intention, why he wants to have this money, is for his studying. So his base value is wealth, and then the scope of his value is enlightenment, which is his studies. So now, there is the key principles of effective disciplining through Filipino values. So let us see what are those. So first, a value must be chosen freely. It is not inflicted by someone else. You yourself personally give value to the thing or to the person that you choose to. And then it comes from alternatives and after considering all consequences and effects of the various alternatives. So second, a value must be prized and cherished both publicly and as one choice. So we have here the third, which is a value must be acted by the person and with a pattern of consistency and repetition. So next thing we need to know is that the overall objective of effective disciplining through Filipino values is to enable each supervisor to handle problematic and critical situations with the employees in a manner which is satisfactory both to the organization and to the employee. So the next thing, for us to achieve this, we need to have value analysis. So indicated that the two of the most numerous problems with which the supervisors must deal with are those of substandard employees. So the quality and the quantity of employees' output, and the poor work habits, the behavior which is deleterious to the employee or to the work group. So the next thing we need to know is the negative mentalities of Filipinos. First is kapag nakikita, bawal. Kung hindi nakikita, hindi bawal. So, ginagawa naman ang lahat. Bakit ako magpapabuli? Ano ako, tanga? The third thing is that if you can't beat them, join them attitude. And the fourth is that ipabugbog kita kung itutuloy mo ang iyong tamang hakbang. So, we have here the fifth, bantay sa lakay mentality. It is somewhat like a person in power takes advantage of the things or persons under him. The bukid pattern mentality, the urinating anywhere and anytime attitude. The walang bigayan, walang lamangan. It is the attitude that's so characteristics of city traffics. The men are lost on the Metro Manila's bottleneck-prone streets. We also have here the singitan or dukotan. So it pays to the wary of pickpocketeers and hold-up gangs when one is on a jeepney or in a bus or on a broad daylight or nighttime. EB or siphoning out of the superior scarce gasoline for sale to taxi or tricycle drivers. So there is a need for close monitoring and control of subordinates. We also have the pusoy or pekwa due to the Filipinos' ardent love for gambling. We also have here the bayadniban and the gatasan in financial transactions, such as has a need for check and balance for financial people. The vendetta or gantihan, the lintik lamang ang walang ganti and sulutan among the competing subordinates. There is a need for coordination and proper communication for this mentality. And then, kunting utot sa bahay, absent na agad sa trabaho. These are the tendencies to tardiness and absenteeism. There is a need for a firm implementation of company policy. So, those are the Filipino negative mentalities. So, we have here the Pinoy style or the consideration of Filipino on discipline. So, the Pinoy style consideration and discipline is at first, it demands firmness and kindness at the same time. So, it requires trust, yet it requires also vigilance. So, because of the bipolarity of Filipino values, a superior in the Philippine setting must trust his people like angels but watch them like devils. So, and speaks softly but carry a big stick. So, the style here also is the tutok or close supervision, which is needed because of the negativeness of the Filipino values as what is mentioned earlier, may be reactivated anytime. But here, to balance this with, we need to have tiwala or trust. We should exercise this as the superior toward his subordinates because the innate goodness of Filipinos is always there. So now, we'll proceed to the approach to disciplining. So, what is our approach in disciplining? It is through cariño con centuron or amor con latigo. Or in English, it is whipping but with love. So the approach should be positive and developmental, but the administrative and punitive measure against the violators like the hanging Damocles sword should also be present. The foundation of good discipline is first good instruction. A superior should always be ready to provide his subordinates with the necessary means of education. Anything a superior does to win the kalooban of the Filipino subordinates and support them with a greater personal success decreases the number of disciplinary cases. We also have here a negative or punitive approach when not accompanied by positive act is not effective way of disciplining Filipinos because they will have the mentality such as, why should I follow this if he himself is not able to do this for me? The mentality which says that I cannot benefit from following this person or that person. That's why it should be balanced. Having the negative punitive approach, it should be balanced with a positive act as a supervisor, as a superior. So the other thing is that a superior must lead and set example if he is to discipline. For example, you want to eliminate tardiness in your office or in your work. So you yourself must exercise it first. Because good rules and carefully devised corrective penalty alone will not ensure the satisfactory implementation of disciplinary program if the superior himself does not administer the program intelligently, fairly, and firmly. That's why there is also palakasan, which is the impression makes malakas kay boss or strongly affiliated with the boss. It is given when a superior neglects to keep checked or does not impose any disciplinary action on the infractions committed by the subordinates. This happens when some subordinates are branded as bata ng boss or proteges of the boss. So now let's proceed to the role of values in discipline. So man is neither pulled in front or pushed from behind, rather than he is driven from within what he values. So what he thinks and subsequently by what he feels and what he does. According to McClelland, he believes in malleability of human nature. Malleability is that within limits, people could shift their value pattern and learn new behavior that would make them more disciplined in their jobs and in their lives. That's why earlier, they said that Filipinos in other countries are more disciplined than the Filipinos being here in the Philippines. Because of this is what McClelland believes. So here we have Bennis, a behavioral scientist who recognizes the disappearance of unifying values in man. He felt that there is dissensus, not consensus, in man's system. So the challenge now is to harmonize the corporate values with the cultural values. So now, let's proceed to discipline through Filipino values for progress. So many persons, including some experts, think that our Filipino values, traits, and customs are obstacle to the economic progress. So I think it is not just some expert, but even we ourselves, we have some certain thinking that we have the values that hinders the progress, not just personally but also economically, such as the attitude of don't know how to save. Filipino, instead of saving, he spends the hard-earned money on fiestas, on baptism. The Filipino family is too close a system and a tight-knit that a kin relationship is extended for business and political realms. That's why here in the Philippines, this is the hierarchy in the political position. For example, you are going to apply for that establishment, not prone to getting hired. because of this mentality or because of this attitude, the Filipino family is so close that it also extends to the business or even to the professionalism of a Filipino. So now, that's why the pseudo experts wants to change the Filipino values and attitude and transplant a totally foreign system lock, stock, and barrel together with its cultural values. I think it's not just the pseudo experts but we ourselves. Diba? We have this mentality. The more educated we become, we have the capacity to think of changing our innate values with the foreign values that we have learned somewhere else. So these are the following: less oriented to the family, less authoritarian, less prejudiced, less personalistic, less shy, less subjective, less spiritual but more individualistic, more impersonal, more of a free thinker, more independent, and more open to group discussions. Here, we also have to open our mind that wanting to change the values and attitude of Filipinos without really understanding what the larger consequence of individual change would be could result to somewhat negative to each of the Filipino. Take the case of the value independence and the personalism advocated to be instilled among the Filipinos. So this may have negative effects within the context of Philippine experience. So in 1940s, Filipinos showed national discipline by secretly helping our guerrillas toward deliverance from Japanese. So this kind of Filipino value is called bayanihan. Such discipline disappeared when we tried to inculcate the foreign value of individualism, the so-called me first or me only. But as we can see today, as this pandemic goes, the innate value of Filipino is slowly showing up, like the reported case of having the community pantry, which seeks to help each individual. So there is a certain goodness within the Filipino that should not be taken away from a Filipino with regards to the matter of discipline. That's why we cannot say that a Filipino values can hinder the progress, because as what we have learned previously, there is a genius among the poor, and that is the very value of a Filipino, the value of bayanihan. So the good value which is innate already in a Filipino, which could lead to progress. So the conclusion for this report is that disciplining Pinoy style or with the Filipino consideration makes subordinates realize that their success is assured by following their superior's leadership. If they do, they themselves will want to live according to the rules, to the standards, and to the code of ethics. So they will have an internal motivation that will serve to control their own behavior and to some extent the behavior of other employees. So to Filipino subordinates, action speaks louder than words. So that would be all for today. Thank you. As for reference for this report, I've got that from the Effective Discipline Through Filipino Values by Dr. Tomas Quintin Dorato Andres and Pilar Corazon B. Ilada Andres. And for the Filipino Views, I've got that from philstar.com.